Hi, and welcome to everybody. Welcome to our first IKS Academy webinar. I just want to take some time to go over a couple little housekeeping things. First of all, the topic today is going to be how to use safety to drive enrollment, as well as introducing a little bit about the S.C.O.P.E philosophy, talking a little bit about what IKS Academy is going to be doing, etc. So just a couple of extra things. We're scheduled for about 90 minutes today. An hour of them is going to be based on the content. We've got 30 minutes afterwards, just in case there's any questions that we can answer. So go ahead and get through the hour, and you'll be getting a certificate afterwards, certifying that you finished the webinar with us. Also, we have some safety checklist and handouts for you towards the end as well. So make sure that we get some good information in your guys' hands. Alrighty. One of the first things that I kind of want to do today is just kind of talk about what IntelliKid System is. Obviously, the IntelliKid Systems Academy is sponsored by IntelliKid Systems, and it's something that's pretty close to my heart. To give you a little bit of background on me, I am the CEO and founder of IntelliKid Systems, but I'm also second generation childcare professional, I suppose you would say. My family started a chain of childcare centers in Las Vegas. We operated those for almost 40 years before we were acquired by a national company. And we had quite a lot of interesting kind of process going from the early 80s all the way through to almost the end of the second decade of the 2000s. So a lot of these learnings that you'll be seeing today have come from that experience, and it kind of is what helped us build the original IntelliKid Systems. So what is IntelliKid Systems? It's a lead management software to help you handle all of the inquiries that you have that come in. We have kind of based this on these 5 pillars of lead management. That you want to capture the leads every place that you can to make sure that nothing is falling through the cracks. You want to communicate your message, your program in a uniform manner. Uniformity of communication is probably one of the biggest things that leads to enrollment growth. Being able to organize all of that information to know where someone is in the buying process, right in the enrollment process, right at any given point in time, whether they've toured, whether they're still thinking, whether they're on the waiting list. This ability to engage, have two-way conversations through a multitude of channels, text message, email, to really understand what that prospect is looking for and how your center can provide it. And then, of course, to analyze that data, to look for trends, to see which of your marketing dollars are being most effective, and to really understand your enrollment process from start to finish. So we have been building this software for all the way back to its original version in 2014. We've really had a lot of great growth in the last couple of years, bringing success to customers like you. Responsible for over 10,000 enrollments, 25,000 minutes of inquiry calls. Those calls are recorded. Those calls are able for you to review. It's one of the biggest things that people talk about in IntelliKid Systems is, oh my gosh, I can hear what people are saying on the phone about me. And of course, we have a huge, our clients are able to track every lead that they have, over 100,000 leads managed. We have a couple of quotes here up from some of our customers. Again, just kind of making this introduction of what we are for those of you who haven't heard about us before. And that kind of brings us to what we're doing here today. The IntelliKid Systems Academy is kind of something that is something close to both of our hearts, Karen and I, and you'll get to meet Karen here in a minute. It's about sharing information. It's about sharing best practices and about sharing what works, and something that we want to give out, for free. As we began to create meaningful conversations with childcare professionals across the United States and internationally, because we are an international company, we identified that there's this thirst for knowledge about the best practices for how to operate a successful center. we were lucky in being software providers that built a stable and software that works well. So most of our support calls have nothing to do with our program, but more we noticed that more people were talking about how things were built and how to build a successful center. So we believe that our success is intrinsically related to the success of our clients. And we wanted to start a depository of knowledge for the whole industry to benefit from and make sure that it was free and that you can take from it what you want. Now, there's many jurisdictions, and we'll talk about safety and not really get into any licensing stuff today. And of course, any information you get here, you should check to make sure everything lines up with your own jurisdiction. But we're going to be talking about quite a lot of theories, quite a lot of how to approach problems that I think are going to be pretty beneficial. Our mission is pretty clear. It's a commitment to providing the tools and resources for you to be able to achieve a level of excellency in every aspect of operating your early childhood education program. And I think that's really what it is that a lot of times we just need those tools and a different perspective to solve some of the problems that might be having, or make improvements in some of the areas where you can. I want to kind of take us back a little bit and talk about July 20, 1969. So it's a favorite part of history for me. 500 million people in the world were watching the first human to walk on the moon. And it was a special atmosphere back then. It was an atmosphere where the whole country had come together for one purpose. 400,000 people had worked on the moon program throughout the 1960s. And when Kennedy originally set the goal for the United States in 1961, we didn't know how to do it. We absolutely had no idea how to get to where we were trying to get. And I think that this concept of setting a goal, whether it's, I want to have full enrollment, or I want to expand to open a couple of new centers in my community. This idea of setting goals and then trying to figure out how to reach them, I think is helpful. And we call those moonshots now for that exact reason. And that's what we want to try to provide. I think that kind of wraps up well with the Academy's mission statement, is that, let's set these goals. Let's set, very ambitious posts for us to reach, and hopefully we can provide some information to help you get there. So any trip to the moon is going to involve space. And so you'll see a lot about quote unquote space throughout the ICAS Academy material. And here's what we're talking about when we talk about that. We wanted to come up with something that really would divide and capture all areas of operation in a childcare center. And so these are the 5 categories that really each topic is going to touch on a little bit. Staff management, physical environment, accounts, curriculum, enrollment. All 5 of these are basically the pillars that go into operating a childcare center. So today, for example, we're going to talk a little bit about staff management, a little bit about physical environment, a little bit about enrollment, as we talk about this idea of safety and how to make sure that your centers are following the best practices with safety, and how that can also help drive enrollment, and why you want to be taking what you do best and putting it in front of those people who are considering to come to your center. So I'm going to pass it off to Karen now. She's going to introduce herself. Karen is our director of IntelliKid Systems Academy, and she's also someone who's known me my entire life. So it's a great pleasure to introduce her. And Karen, let's get going.
Well, thank you, Jared. I'm thrilled to be here. Yes, I have known you probably your whole life. You and I have known each other for a long time, but let me just tell you a little bit about myself for those who don't know. I've been in the ECE field for over 40 years. I've worked as a teacher, director, area supervisor. I've worked for privately owned companies, and I've worked for one of the largest corporate childcares in the United States. So my passion is the early childhood field. And my goal as the ICAS Academy Director really is simple. I want to share my experience. I want to help you achieve excellency in your early childhood programs. I've been in your shoes. I understand your fears, competing with large corporations, worried about gaining enrollment, trying to find, train, hire, and then retain quality staff, to making budgets and all the financial strains that go with that. So I know that my suggestions work because I've lived them. So today I'm going to talk a little bit about my personal experience, and I hope that that doesn't offend anyone. I just feel that there's a lot to be learned from someone's story. So I'm not a professional speaker, and I hope that you'll take this presentation with the good intent that it was presented. So I am excited to get going. So let's get started. When you look through a telescope, you see small things magnified. A star in the sky could look just like a dot if you looked at it with a naked eye. But when you look through a telescope, instead of seeing a single star, you might see that it is actually two stars that are close together. A telescope helps magnify details and is one of the most important investigative tools in astronomy. So using what I call a scope philosophy will help us look at details for improvement. Focusing on details in early childhood is a way to build a strong reputation. Making the childcare experience a positive one so parents have only good things to say about you means paying attention to details to prevent mistakes. Simple mistakes are easy to overlook, but when they start to happen over and over again, your school can definitely look unorganized. Eventually, this is going to lead to your parents having less confidence in your school and lead to decreased enrollment. So if a parent can't find their child's jacket, they may overlook it the first time. And because you've developed a strong relationship, they may overlook it again. But by the third or fourth time, you've lost that child. So by taking a closer look through SCOPE approach, we can magnify the details and come up with solutions for improvements. Now, what does SCOPE mean? Well, SCOPE stands for safe, clean, organized, professional, and educational. And in our childcare centers, we developed the acronym SCOPE that eventually was part of our school's mission statements and philosophies. We started thinking about what was important to parents. What were they concerned about when they were enrolling their children in our schools? So we began doing research to find out if parents were changing, if parents' concerns were changing, and if our tours addressed the parents' concern. We started surveying parents just by asking them what was important to them. And what we found out was that parents were concerned about many things. They were concerned about kindergarten readiness, nutrition, class size, teacher qualifications, curriculum, procedures, safety, security. So we categorized those concerns into the 5 areas of SCOPE: safe, clean, organized, professional, and educational. And the SCOPE concepts were a foundation for us to define our purpose, our philosophies, and our goals. From there, we used the SCOPE approach as a catchphrase for our in-school marketing. It was displayed on our parents' board. It was talked about as part of our philosophy when doing tours with parents. And some schools really came up with cute ways, cute, imaginative, clever ways to display the SCOPE philosophy using telescopes that the children are made, or magnifying glasses, or even just photos of children behind the big binoculars. So SCOPE was really a successful campaign for our schools. So safety, as we know, is a primary concern and was defined by us in our child care centers. But what does safety really mean? Jared?
Well, one of the things I just wanted to touch on there was kind of what you were talking about when, not only did we take SCOPE as a thought process and something that we used internally to audit the way we were approaching every problem to make sure that we were touching all 5 points of importance within the operations of a center, but also we we developed that into a public facing thing. And this is something we'll touch on a little bit later on in terms of how developing safety helps with enrollment. But remember that some of these things that you may have already come up with, some of the overriding kind of methodologies that you already use, that's of interest to people who are doing business with you. That's of interest to the parents who are in your center. We found successfully when we were creating kind of the persona of the brand early on, that bringing people into that conversation, some of the stuff that was behind the scenes, but was still of interest because it had to do with how we approach taking care of the children. We were able to use that as marketing. People were able to use that as, oh, well, when they're shopping between different centers and, one of them is using this philosophy, they'll start asking if the other one is, and it helps you stand out. So I love the fact that, you were talking about how the kids were doing the telescope and stuff like that. And I just think it's important to take some of these behind the scene things that are really great and bring them in front of the curtain.
Definitely. Yeah, I definitely agree that that is an important thing. But, now really what is safety about? Of course, the first thing when it has to be talked about when we talk about safety is COVID safety. There's no doubt that the spread of coronavirus is scary. And we're nearly a year into this pandemic, and parents are still concerned about the virus every day. So the safety involves what your center is doing to prevent an outbreak of COVID. Addressing these issues is the norm for now, and your center's methods need to be clear, concise, understandable, and of course, communicated to the parents. Everyone should be focused on children's safety and implementing preventative measures that make sense for your organization. Hand washing, social distancing, mask wearing, taking temperatures, and limiting access to people in the building are proven ways to prevent the spread of coronavirus. Of course, everybody knows to look to the CDC and the state for recommendations. At the beginning of the pandemic, developing procedures consumed our industry. Now, continuing to refine the procedures as things change is our current way of life. So we do need to focus on COVID, but luckily though, the data shows that children are less vulnerable to get COVID and rarely experience severe symptoms. That's good news. And it's helping to calm parents' fears. We definitely want to try as much as we can to calm the fears of the parents. The other good news, of course, is that the vaccine and the rollout in some states to essential workers. Just yesterday, I saw something on the news that said that there's no additional risk to childcare employees. And the reason for that was because of the quick way that childcare's reacted to putting COVID safety procedures in place, and also because we have always had them in place. So that is, again, good news. And on that same segment, unfortunately, I saw something that talked about that childcare enrollments because of COVID were down an average of 33% nationwide. Now, I know for me, some of my schools were actually lower than that. And that's why focusing on safety is an important path to increasing our enrollment. So communicating your COVID policies helps parents trust that you are trying to guard against the infection, that it's safe for their child to attend your school. So by now, hopefully, you've established your protocols and you've developed your COVID procedures to keep everyone safe. But we also, as we're thinking about COVID, we want to not just focus on COVID, but remember that parents are still concerned about the same safety protocols that they've always been concerned about. Are there safe materials and toys in the school? Is the playground equipment safe? How is the playground monitored? How are teachers supervising the children? And of course, security. How is the environment secured? How are drop-off procedures handled? Is the environment secure from intruders? And how is parent pickup handled? So even though parents may not be able to walk into your building because of COVID, they still are concerned about who's allowed to pick up the children and what your procedures are.
One of the nice things that I like about, going over safety, and especially with everything you just said, Karen, and not, with what's going on with COVID is not focusing on it. I think that one of the things that happened as a direct result, especially last year during those early months when everyone was trying to figure out, the entire conversation about safety within the school was consumed by COVID. And it doesn't mean that any of the other things that are important about what we do to protect their child in childcare centers has gone away. And so addressing the concerns, absolutely. Doing it in a concise way and moving on to other topics of security, I think exudes a certain type of confidence that you really have the situation in hand. And let's focus on the other childcare thing. Another thing that allows it to kind of be a great transition when you kind of just don't focus on it completely is, depending on what region you are, depending on what the individual thinks about what's going on, you can just say, hey, listen, here's what we're doing, here's what we've implemented, and let's take a look at the safety features that we have long held dear in order to make sure that we can take care of your child properly. So I think that's one of the great things about making sure that you have a balanced safety conversation, especially with what's going on now.
Absolutely. I definitely agree. And of course, highlighting your safety protocols can be a huge value to ease fears and help parents make informed decisions about attending the center. So communicate your safety procedures. On your website, you want to post that, even maybe making it a headline. Safety is our top concern. Parents should be able to find information about what's important in your safety procedures. Better yet, even post a short video explaining your safety procedures to parents so that they can watch it from video. Everybody wants to see things on video now. And of course, using social media to talk about your safety procedures. You want to join parents groups and start conversations or continue conversations about safety procedures. And of course, sending emails and text to inquiring parents about your safety procedures. And Jared, of course, IKS can help us do that, right?
Absolutely. And that's what we were going on back to the things, some of those 5 pillars that we discussed with lead management: communication, being able to present your program uniformly and getting that message out the same, exactly the way you want it to be crafted to the parents every time. If you're not using any kind of assistant that's doing that already, you probably should.
Right. All right. Well, let's talk about what we can do as administrators and leaders to develop a safety culture in our school. So a safety culture can be described as the product of individual and group values, perceptions, competencies, and patterns of behavior. The safety culture at a child care center can be described as administrators, teachers, parents, and children working together to provide a safe environment for all. So a safety culture is a group attitude that inspires individual action. And a safety culture motivates individuals to take action to prevent injury. So I think that is hugely important, that we just don't want to talk about safety, but we want that to be instinctual to the people that are in our building, and they understand that they are part of a safety culture.
There's another, there's another benefit here, and obviously you guys all know, we're in one of the highest liability industries, a very litigious industry. Creating this safety culture not only is going to be good for the program, good for the children, but also good for you as an owner. When you have this ingrained into the culture of your employees, that they know that safety is such an important thing. And of course, we're using very broad words here, and we're going to dig into the specifics on safety later on. But being able to fall back on that, these protocols are going to help you in, reducing your liability as much as you can, presenting it, to in the instance that something happens, you're going to be able to say, hey, listen, we do have these protocols, and this is when they were last checked, et cetera. So there are a lot of different facets to how this can be important to you as a business owner, as well as to you as a provider of care for children. Yes,
definitely. So, but in order to have a safety culture, we have to have training with our teachers. Some safety behaviors are common sense and instinctual to some teachers, but most employees need specific training on the whys behind some of the procedures. So consider dedicating a small portion of every staff meeting to formal staff training. For us, we set a goal to train teachers to safety behavior that was habit strength. So we did that through reinforcement and repetition of hands-on training. So we wanted the safety behavior to be instinctual, just like every time that you get in your car, what do? You put on your seatbelt. That's an instinctual safety behavior that was trained into us. And that's what we want our environments to be, our teachers to be instinctual and develop habit strength with our safety protocols. So we were also fortunate enough to have 2 staff development days a year when the school was closed for the children, but the teachers attended. And so safety training was a portion of the curriculum, and training, the hands-on training really locked in important safety procedures for the teachers. The other thing that we really want to do, and I'm sure everybody is doing right now, is matching newer employees with seasoned veterans of your procedures. It's a great way to create consistency in your center safety, have the uniformity that we've talked about across all of our staff, and give you the confidence as a owner or director that you can focus on other things besides safety and push your business forward. So where do we start with safety training? Well, in developing safety training, I think that the place to start is to identify what hazards are in your environment. So the most common types of injuries are slips, trips, and falls. So that might be a great place to start. What you want to do is go through your school, identify your places where there might be incidences of slips, trips, and falls might happen. Go through your playgrounds, identify the hazards that are in your own environment. Then what you want to do is to determine risk of injury. Is someone mopping the floor? Is there a risk? What is the risk of somebody slipping on the wet floor? Is it unlikely? Is it likely? Is it highly likely? And by determining the risk, then that gives you a basis for determining your safety rules and what you want to focus on and establish in your school. So when you're establishing your safety protocols, your safety regulations, what you're going to use in your school, you want to use existing resources to build your training. So focus on being compliant with your regulatory agencies, licensing, health, fire department, and other local agencies. Then what federal guidelines do you need to follow? Some schools need to follow OSHA requirements or CDC. And then what are best practices in childcare? So caring for our children is an excellent resource, and I hope that you all are using Caring for Our Children. Just on their website, they describe themselves as a collection of national standards that represent the best practices based on evidence, expertise, and experience for quality, health, and safety policies and practices for today's early care and education settings. So if you're accredited, what recommendations do those organizations make? And if you've been in business for a while, use what you've got. Look back at your licensing or health department reports and identify what you are currently doing right and where you might need improvement. Use all of these resources to determine your safety rules and build your safety from there. So as you are determining your safety rules, you want to think about a couple other things. One is that you want to think about what you want to control and how. Control systems either eliminate the hazard, take it away, so it's no longer a hazard, or reduce the exposure to the hazard, or change the working habits of employees. So earlier I mentioned about mopping the floor. So let's go back to that example for a little bit. We know that slips, trips, and falls are the most common safety hazard. So mopping the floor has a high risk of somebody coming along and slipping on the wet floor. Now, you can eliminate that hazard completely, of course, by never mopping. I wouldn't suggest that in your childcare center. It's probably not the most practical thing to do, not to mention just unsanitary and just plain gross. So I wouldn't recommend that. But we could reduce the exposure to the hazard by not allowing anyone to mop while there's people in the building. Now, that is a possibility. All cleaning could be done when the center is closed at night. Again, probably not the most practical thing to do when we're talking about young children that are going to spill and they're going to be messy, and there's probably going to be times that we do need to mop. So I think that what we're really left with is changing the working habits of the employees, getting them to take action by, of course, training and the education of the rules. So if you need to mop, you need to secure the area by placing wet floor signs. Now, again, that's probably not going to be so effective in our childcare centers where young children don't read. So we might need to think a little bit about what we're going to do for making sure that the children understand that. They could place, we could teach children about what a wet floor sign means, and how they need to act around the wet floor sign.
And I think this goes back again to what we're talking about, creating this safety culture, because, you know, we're not being, you know, overly simplistic by saying, oh, you mop the floor and you put wet floor signs down, but it's about how everything works together in tandem. So the teachers, as they're walking, if they're maneuvering down that hallway with a group of children, stopping and talking about the sign and saying how it's careful, making sure that the person who first identifies the spills not only to action, whether it be to clean it up themselves, but to immediately notify the office staff to put everything into progress, because sometimes those spills in certain environments can sit for longer, and that's a much worse safety hazard of the spill not being addressed, let alone it being mopped up and then having signage there that says it's a wet floor. So it's about how people are reacting to the situations. And again, going back to those building your training, saying, hey, look, there's a finite number of things that we usually deal with. Let's really make sure that this procedure is locked down, everyone understands it, and they take ownership of the process. And I think that as some of these things are, you know, may seem a little bit self-explanatory, it isn't always when you're dealing with employees on every level. It's explanatory when they haven't been trained what your expectations are, and I think that's what the focus is.
Right. So I think that a safety culture demands that actions are taken to prevent injury. So in a strong safety culture, the person mopping the floor is going to think just beyond that. They're going to put out the signs, but they're also going to warn people, hey, the floor's wet, don't walk on it. So I've even seen really strong established safety cultures where the director is taking action. She goes over and she's warning everybody not to walk on the floor. So I think that you're right, is what we're saying is that we really want to develop a safety culture where the people that are in the safety culture take action to prevent injury. So we also want to have a continued path to improvement. It's one thing to develop this strong safety culture, but we have to continue to do that. Even though our example of mopping the floor may be simplistic, it's something that's going to happen over and over again. And so we want to continue to make sure that we train and that we retrain and that everyone understands and knows what to do with the safety checklist that we've established. And Jared, we have put together a little bit of a safety checklist for as a handout for this presentation. And so I think that it just explains, it is very basic, and it's meant for you guys to take and develop personally. What are your safety procedures? How can you look at the areas that we've laid out and look at your environment and change the safety procedures? So that's one thing that we have ready for you. So once you've developed your safety checklists, you want to make sure that you are auditing, that you're continuing to check your safety procedures, and that you're creating a safe place for feedback is crucial to getting buy-in from employees. Teachers especially need to understand that audits are a path to improvement. Audits can and should help identify issues or areas in need of improvement that will be addressed as learning and training opportunities, not punishment. So a positive safety culture creates safety discussions that improve procedures and actions. It doesn't establish blame. So again, here's where communication is so important and part of our safety culture. And I believe that if a person is listened to, that they have, that they know that their suggestions are taken seriously, that they can make a difference, then they're going to be more invested in helping to establish realistic procedures and be more invested in following those procedures. So if you understand why something was established and you believe that you have control to affect change, then I'm more likely to be I'm more likely to change my behavior and be a part of my behavior. Continuous path to improvement setting sets up a safety culture that everyone is invested in and produces actions that prevent injuries.
And I think, oh, sorry, go ahead.
Good.
Sorry, jumping in there. I just wanted to make one point. I think that, as everyone looks at, employee buy-in and family buy-in, and the thing that comes to mind is how do we get the employee buy-in? And Karen touched a bit about having the safe place for feedback, but really what it starts with is leadership buy-in. You have to make sure that not only are you saying, hey, this is a priority, this is why it's a priority, and making sure that you're setting that example, you're being a part, especially in the beginning. When you try to change culture in anything, you have to exhibit that culture. And so once you have that leadership buy-in, the employee buy-in is going to be a lot stronger. And the family buy-in, that's going to be how you present it. Families are absolutely concerned with not only just the general safety of your establishment, but also how safety is part of your culture. And if you make that part of your message, and that's really important that you do, you're going to get them buying in. You're going to get a lot of people who make it such a priority to talk to other people about you, because these are the things that are going to be extremely important to all three of these parts of your business, both your leadership, yourself, and your other management team, the employees, and the families that are a part of your program.
Yes, yeah, definitely. I agree. But, we can't do this alone. It can't just be the management that has a buy-in. We need to have help. So identify somebody in your school that already has a passion for safety. You probably know that person. They're the person that is always concerned about if somebody's going to fall when they get out of the car in the parking lot. They're looking through the window and they're running out there to help somebody. So think about who you can identify on your staff as this person. They may have experience with safety from other organizations or just always looking out for people. Look for somebody that can lead the staff in safety trainings, understand your current safety checklist, why you do those things, but can also be a person who learns on the job. As things are developing and changing, they're the person who identifies safety hazards in the school and can learn on the job. So the safety captain doesn't have to be their only responsibility, but it does need to be their top priority. For us, we used an office assistant that didn't have any classroom responsibilities. So that was great, but it doesn't have to be somebody that doesn't have any classroom responsibilities. You could use a teacher from a classroom. If you're going to do that, though, you can't expect that they're going to perform these duties from inside the classroom. They need to get out and look at your environment, be in your playgrounds, be in your school, and really evaluate the safety culture that's happening in the school. So for us, our safety captain was trained in 10 top safety behaviors. So, for example, one of our safety behaviors for our children was that they slept with their shoes on. Now, of course, this was a huge controversy for many of the teachers and the children. Of course, it's more comfortable to take your shoes off. It's more natural to take your shoes off if you're going to be on your cot sleeping. And nobody really understood why the children had to leave their shoes on until there was a fire drill at nap time. And Jared, you know that in Las Vegas, where we live, the saying is that you can fry an egg on the sidewalk, and it really was true. So our children wore their shoes at nap time to prevent injury. So we want to think about when you're first developing your safety behaviors. We started out with 30 safety behaviors, but quickly realized that that was too many safety behaviors to focus on for the month, because we wanted to train those behaviors to habit strength.
But one of the things to remember, and I think that the example you brought up about the having the kids sleep with shoes on it is a great example. Some things are going to be unpopular at first. There are going to be questions, and you need to, before you introduce these policies, be prepared to answer those questions. You know, if someone says, well, why are we doing this? You have to have an answer ready, and you can have that exercise with yourself as you look at which policies you want to put in. But a prime example is, you know, like she said, once that fire drill goes off during nap time, and it's not a trigger you want to pull that often because you have a bunch of kids that get woken up from the nap. But once it does happen, you know, there is an understanding of why we do this. You know, you don't have multiple rooms of kids trying to get their shoes on, or even worse, they're going out into the elements. Someone steps on something, create an issue. See, there's a bit of a domino effect here, and this is why we do set up these safety procedures. And don't be afraid of resistance. You know, obviously, you're going to be really thinking about the policies that you want to put in place and why you want them to put them in place. But while there was that initial questioning that we would get as we put in a new policy, eventually it just made sense. And if another teacher questioned it as they came in, because they came from a different organization, you would have this self-realization, excuse me, within within your employees, where one of them is helping the other one of them is mentoring the other one. Well, this is why we do this. This is why it makes sense. And when changing that culture, you start to get a bottom up approach rather than just a top down approach. And I think that's really what the aim should be.
Yes, yeah, I definitely agree. And it's also one of the reasons that you don't want to develop too many safety procedures. So again, we started out with 30 safety procedures that we were focusing on in a month, and there was no way that we could train our teachers to habit strength. So we focused on 10, and they became habit strength, and then we focused on another 10, and they became habit strength. And then eventually, by the time that we got to 30, all 30 of those behaviors, our staff understood. They understood why they were doing them, and why they were really important. So we also want to have someone who can oversee our safety captain. So for us, we had a safety coordinator, and our safety coordinator really helped us to have accountability throughout our procedures. We were fortunate enough to have a safety coordinator who was somebody that was not at our school on a regular basis, but was familiar with the company's safety protocols. For us, that was an area supervisor, and they would regularly review health and safety legislation and monitor any changes that was happening with that. They would also write specific safety policies and procedures that could be incorporated into the school's safety procedures. They would perform quarterly audits on the schools, and the results of those audits could determine what procedures needed to be revised.
Now, we had the opportunity of having, we were operating 10 locations. We had multiple different area supervisors. So the safety coordinator was a logical step in making sure that we had that accountability and feedback group from the director to the supervisor to the lead management staff. And I think that was a great loop that we created. Now, if you're running a single site, or you're constantly across 2 sites, you can be the safety coordinator yourself. You can cut out an extra rung of that, and as leadership, you can be the one that's a safety coordinator. But again, not doing everything yourself. Still having the safety captain, analyzing how things are going on the ground level in the trenches, so to speak, making that report, and you're the one that gets to have that analysis and continue on with that loop. These things are incredibly important. Also, not keeping all the information locked up in yourself, because there's always going to be times when you're not at that school. So having safety captains and a coordinator, whether that coordinator is you or another rung of your management structure, extremely important.
Right. Well, Jared, you talked a lot about the safety feedback loop, and really, again, it's a circle. So it's not just one person that's doing all of this, but it involves the safety coordinator, the safety captain, doing the audits, and then analyzing what's happening from that, so that we can give feedback that's going to be a positive thing for the teachers that are at our school. And it really does develop a strong safety loop, a strong safety culture where things are not falling through the cracks, and that we can really be proud of what we've done. So now that you've prepared,
if you can just hop back one more slide for me here. Sorry, I was a little late to the party. Here's one thing that I absolutely want to say. Not only is this loop important for your standard safety protocols, the things that you have developed to make sure that they're being implemented properly, et cetera. This is also an important protocol to have for things that are outside the norm, things that you may have first experienced, be it a broken bone on a playground equipment, maybe a shelter-in-place drill that was ordered, or some sort of a unusual emergency in the area around your school. You need to have a framework to where if you experience something that you haven't experienced before, you're immediately able to sit down with the safety captain, with the coordinator if you have one, and create new measures that need to be created. The most important thing about this loop is that it's living, that it's constantly changing, and not only are you adapting your current protocols to keep up with the times, or any new technology, or any new environmental factors, but also that when you do experience something for the first time, when it is something that is unusual, and that you need to do that kind of a debrief on what your response to it was, a new policy gets put in place. That way you get to use your experience to your advantage. By the time you get to 5 years and 10 years and 20 years in the business, you should have such a solid framework around responding to crises that it does become that second nature. Now, some of that is only done through experience, but if you don't have the processes in place to respond to a unique crisis, to create a new procedure, and to make sure that it filters down through your process, things are just going to get more difficult as your organization grows.
Yes, yeah, definitely. So now that you have a well-prepared plan, a highly trained staff, now it's time to highlight your excellence as a safety enrollment tool. So what do we do? What do we do? This is where you really want to put this on your website. You want to highlight this. You want to make it a banner and talk about what your safety procedures are, and highlight that to your parents, and that will really help ease the fears that your parents have, and really know that you have a strong safety culture, especially if they come into your school and are start talking to people. For us, there was a lot of unique features that we had, and Jared, you'll remember this, but we were one of the first to have the biometric fingerprint that was part of our management, and so we advertised that. We talked about how that helps with safety, how that is going to help parents to be able to know that their child is in a secure environment, and that the person that's picking up their child is the person that should be picking up their child. So I know that developing and highlighting unique safety procedures will lead to increased enrollment. Don't you agree, Jared?
I do, and this is the part that I'm obviously most passionate about, seeing as we deal with enrollment, enrollment tools as a company. Really, imagine this. Do a little exercise with yourself. Imagine that one of your parents is being interviewed by another parent, and they're asking, what does your childcare center do for check-in and check-out? What's unique about their playgrounds that are safe? Is there any other unique safety features? Is the average parent in your center going to be able to answer those questions? How well are you presenting how you address safety on your tours? How well are you presenting it in your informational emails? What are you doing in the enrollment process that addresses safety? Ask yourself that question. If the question is nothing, you know where to start from. You should have, we talk a lot about this when we do some of the more enrollment centric webinars, but this 6-week plan after someone inquires about you, makes an inquiry to your center, you should have a 6-week plan of communication. And some of that communication should not just be directly, hey, are you going to enroll? But let me tell you a little bit about my program. The single most effective enrollment tool you have is your own program, and you need to be presenting it properly. So what are you doing for safety? Here's a prime example. There was always the issue of door jams and how kids would get their fingers pinched in door jams. And after years of dealing with that, we came up with our own idea and we built it ourselves. It was some high, what would you call it? It was carpet, basically, some kind of thick carpet that was, bolted on either side around the door jam. So even if a child's hand was in it when the door closed, it wouldn't hurt them. Now, that was a highlight of the tour. Yes. Part of the tour was to open the door and stick your hand in and close it and show that it couldn't hurt the kid. And that's something it was something simple. It was just a small part of our overall physical environment, but it stuck with people. It was something that people would say, oh, I remember those cool carpet things that you have. That's what brought them back. You never know, in sales, and let's be honest, enrollment is sales. You never know what's going to resound with someone. You never know that small thing that gets in their head that is what brings them back. So you really need to be doing a good job of presenting the things you do well, and safety should absolutely be something you're doing well.
Yes, definitely. So I hope that you have enjoyed our magnified look at safety and using a SCOPE philosophy that will help you probe into the areas of safe, clean, organized, professional, educational, to look at the details that are really going to improve your center. And finally, I hope to splash down with our journey to space. So remember that in IKS Academy, our categories are fivefold. We're really talking about staff development, physical environment, accounts, curriculum, and enrollment. So in our next webinar, which I believe is on February 25th, one of the things that we're going to talk about is staff development. And I believe that developing your staff is one of the most important things that you can do. Having a quality staff is really a asset to your business. It's probably one of the biggest assets to your business. So we're going to talk about how to motivate, inspire, develop, and train your staff.